There we go. Okay, fabulous. Welcome to Talking Data Equity for Friday, March 24th. We are so happy to have you. My name is Heather Kraus, and I am coming to you today from Toronto, Canada. And what this is a weekly gathering of that's brought to you by We All Count, which is an organization that I work for. And the point of We All Count is to build tools and gather community and provide support for anybody at all who is working on the practice of data equity. And the practice of data equity is, of course, a big, complicated topic. But bottom line is, it is working to use the quantitative data in our projects in a way that aligns with the values and the lived experiences that we're trying to center in those quantitative projects. So that's what data equity is. And one of the things that We All Count learned after a couple of years of building these tools and working with folks is that a lot of us can feel really lonely. We might be the only person in our organization or one of few people that kind of feels like they're swimming upstream trying to work on data equity. And so to kind of make people feel a little bit connected, a little bit less alone on a weekly basis, we gather together informally on Fridays to do something called Talking Data Equity. And sometimes talking data equity, we go really deep into a technical question, like something about, Bayesian analysis or sampling strategies. Sometimes we go into less technical topics about making communication choices and really just like ways to manage change. And sometimes we have special guests. And today we have a very exciting special guest. Our special guest today is Howard Shih from AAPI Data. And they've just produced some really, really important research and are doing lots of thinking about the ways that we can successfully gather and use and communicate about this particular type of data without accidentally doubling down on stereotypes and oppression and marginalization. So I am going to turn it over to Howard. And as I do, a quick reminder that we are doing something that is a little bit challenging from a community point of view, which is we run this as a meeting because we really want you all to feel as connected as possible, that you can see each other and hear each other. And so we run this as a Zoom meeting. And what we're going to ask is, while Howard is sharing his screen and presenting his slides, we are going to ask that if you have questions and comments at that point in Talking Data Equity, please use the Zoom chat. You can ask as many questions as you want, put all your comments, have conversations with the other people here in the Zoom chat while Howard is presenting. And then we're going to turn it over for a live Q&A. And then at that point, we'll ask that you raise your hand and you can go ahead and unmute yourself. All right. Last housekeeping thing I will say is that if at any point you want to ask a question or make a comment privately, you can use the Zoom drop-down menu and communicate directly with me. You don't have to communicate with the entire group. That is perfectly fine. Okay, so without further ado, I am going to, with a lot of gratitude for making time in your extremely busy schedule, turn it over to Howard. Welcome, Howard. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Heather. I know this has been a long time in the planning, and I certainly appreciate you accommodating the schedule that I have. And I'm glad to see so many people on this call, and hopefully people will get something out of the presentation that I have today. First, start off with a little bit about AAPI Data. We're about a 10-year-old project that's run out of the School of Public Policy at the Center of Social Innovation at UC Riverside. our main goal is to work on improving access to data for Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander communities. And we do that in a variety of ways. One is creating tools to help people better understand the data that's available. We also do surveys that particularly target the AA and NHPI communities to address data gaps and important issues. For example, the Asian American Voters Survey, the surveys with Momentum about discrimination and anti-Asian hate experiences, and working with the California Health Interview Survey to do specifically targeted follow-up surveys on the Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander populations. Another way that we help is we advocate on, and this is what I'll be mainly discussing today, is looking at how we can advocate for data equity for Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander communities. Prior, and I've been at AAPI Data for about a year. Last March was my first day. Before that, I spent about 15 years at the Asian American Federation, where I was finished up as the research and policy director, using data to advocate on behalf of Asian American communities across New York City and New York State. So I'm going to just jump in and, feel free. I might not be able to answer questions right away, but I will try to get to all the questions that show up in the chat as well. I'm going to share my screen. Make sure it's sharing the right one. Share. So everyone can see the, okay, that's great. All right, so yeah, so I'm going to talk a little bit about our data equity initiatives, but I'm going to start off with a little bit of background on, talk a little bit about where the roots of the advocacy around data equity, and then talk a little bit about how we've expanded the goals and the recommendations, and then focus on 3 of the recommendations that we had in our report that we released last, I think it was last June or May. I can't remember. So many reports, so much time. And then focus on 3 of those recommendations and campaigns that we had prioritized around those recommendations. So a little bit of background. So for the Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander communities, data disaggregation has been a focal point of a lot of advocacy for at least 40 years. You can see here the importance of, the last round of changes that happened in 1997 around the federal statistical standards around race and ethnicity. Finally broke apart Asian from Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander, requiring federal agencies to collect and report that data separately. And you can see why that's so important, because if you combine Asians and NHPIs together, you end up really disguising the challenges, in this case, looking at poverty rates of the Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander community, where the Asian community is just so large, it would subsume and average out, and you wouldn't be able to see that there's substantially higher poverty rates among Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders. But we also have been pushing for increased data disaggregation even within those 2 broad categories. And you can see here from the recent poverty data, this is from 2020, that you have a huge range of experiences happening within the Asian community and within the Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander communities. So you go anywhere from 6% for Indians and Filipinos all the way up to 25% for Burmese, the Burmese population, which is largely a refugee population at this point because of recent refugee resettlement programs. And then you also see a huge range between, compared Marshallese and Fijians. There's a very large range as well. So, fundamentally, that is why we have a community have been pushing for data disaggregation. But as the years have gone by, we've really reached to a point where we realize that there's more to it than just data disaggregation. So there's this whole, we've kind of labeled it disaggregation plus. Disaggregation still is a focal point and is a really high priority. And we're working really hard with our partners, such as the National Council of Asian Pacific Americans, to focus on the new proposals for revisions of the federal statistical standards around race and ethnicity. But we also have change the focus. We need to really include, the broader definition of what data equity is about. And I think this group and, Heather, your whole, the whole reason, their whole organization is about this, is that we really need to focus on how timely and accessible the data is. We need to make sure that the data is readily available for community members to understand. We also make sure that the community is included in the whole data process, right? Everything from creation of the surveys through how the data is processed and how the tables are determined, all the way through dissemination. And then we also want to make sure that, at least at the federal agency level and at other levels, that they recognize that there is expertise within the community that can really help them shape the way that the data is processed, created and processed and understood, and making sure that they're part of that process. So as part of this sort of new viewpoint, we came up with about 10 recommendations that we thought really essential to sort of achieving data equity for Asian American and Native Hawaiian and Pacific Island populations. Our first recommendation was really centered around making sure that there's opportunities to show how, particularly around the equitable data working group recommendations, to find cases to really encourage federal agencies to see the value of how the data, disaggregated data and data that's coming from with community perspective would really help them both do their work, but also be insightful for the community as a whole. Our second recommendation is that, mainly focused on encouraging the federal government to, and this is now in process, to really revise the minimum standards that were created in 1997 to really reflect some of the changes that have been happening within the community and the diversity of the community, and figuring out how best to encourage the development of collection of more detailed race and ethnicity data. Recommendation 3 is similar, where we really want to encourage them to focus on how agencies can go beyond the collection of the minimum standards, and really encourage the administration to focus on the fact that the minimum standards are only a minimum standard, and that additional data collection should be encouraged and should be incentivized. We also have recommendation number 4, where we really want to make sure that those recommendations, the previous 3 recommendations, come with the funding that agencies need to be able to implement those new standards, and so that the challenges that are often cited of having to update data systems and things like that are, those barriers and obstacles are removed. Recommendation 5 is really making sure that the federal government keeps track of the progress that's being made, making sure that there's an annual report, and that we proposed through the Domestic Policy Council, because that's where the equitable data working group was housed, but really making sure that there's accountability, and making sure that there's progress made towards the end goals. Recommendation 6 is making sure, and this is related to including community and scientific experts in all stages of the federal statistical data collection process, and making sure that community voices are heard, and that the ways that the data is collected and analyzed and compiled and reported all are framed in the way that the community wants. I'll give you an immediate example of the process where we are working with the South Asian research. I know them by their acronym CIRAC. We noticed that they were including the Hmong community as East Asian. And we know that from the historical experience of the Hmong population, that the vast majority of them are from Southeast Asian communities and have more in common with the refugee communities, the roots of those Southeast Asian communities, and have been working with them to make sure, working with the Census Bureau to make sure that their community desires and the way that they want to feel represented is represented in the way that they are categorized. So making sure that the federal government hears from community and doesn't just make decisions in a vacuum. Recommendation 7, we really want to create a formal structure similar to what the Census Bureau has, where they have both a scientific advisory committee and a community advisory committee on data equity. We want to create some sort of formalized structure for community groups to be part of the process, right? So we don't want it to be informal where something comes up and then we have to make meetings and things like that. We want to have a regular process where things are vetted by different advisory committees, particularly around data equity. Recommendation 8 is really focused on, and this is mainly came about mainly due to a lot of the delays that have happened with the 2020 census data because of COVID and other issues. We really want the federal government to prioritize making sure that data comes out and goes back to the community, and particularly with the census, where the community invested a lot of time and energy to make sure everyone was counted. Having sort of the data on detailed origins only coming out later this year in August 2023. It's almost like 2 years behind schedule at this point. And so we really had to insert this recommendation to really encourage the federal government to make sure that the data comes out on time. We also have recommendation 9. We really want to make sure that we can connect data with the stories of the community, and that those stories help drive action on policy and decision making. And then recommendation 10 is to make sure that when the data is coming out, that there is a formal process where communities engaged and researchers are engaged to understand not only what the data is about, but also have some feedback and evaluation on how the data was collected, and make sure that the next time around things are ever improving. So making sure that there's some sort of formal engagement process with the community that way. So those are a lot of recommendations. Obviously, we couldn't prioritize all of them, but over the last year, we focused on just 3 of them. So one of them is really prioritizing recommendation 10, making sure that there is a formal process or some sort of organized process where community members are able to give input on how data is presented. So the example I'm going to give you is around we reached out. We saw that the Census Bureau really did some major improvements to the data.census.gov portal and their tool. But we noticed that it was a very geographic focused improvement. And what we wanted to do was to advocate for a similar prioritization around race and ethnic data. And one of the driving forces around this is there's an executive order that explicitly stated that the federal government should be taking into account user experience in delivery to help rebuild trust in government. So using that as a kind of an excuse to push the Census Bureau, we really wanted them to use the model that they've created for geographic locations to also think about how we can do a better job of looking at race and ethnicity data. And so we use the example of, when you type in poverty for Texas, you get this really great, you get the answer right away. You don't have to dig into the tables. And you also have on the right a great way to dig deeper, a profile of Texas with all of the major data points that are related to Texas that are popular through whatever process they had to evaluate it. But if you did it for example, Native Hawaiian populations, poverty in Texas, you don't get that answer right away. You have to dig into the data. You actually have to do some pull out your calculator and calculate the poverty rate because doesn't give you the example right away. And if they can do it for geography, they should be able to do it for other dimensions as well. And in our case, we're looking at race and ethnicity. And we showed that this was possible. We actually built our own tool to show that, we can look at Texas, we can identify the NHPI alone or alone in combination data right away. And if you scroll down, you'll have the poverty. I think it's, I don't think we have it. Yeah, right here. So if you do those combinations and you have the poverty data right up and you have the answer right away. I think that's what we're trying to push the Census Bureau to think about, because that's how our community approaches the data, and we want to really make sure. And so what we did was we had a campaign. We asked our community groups to submit to comments to data.census.gov asking for increased visibility. We haven't seen activity yet. We will be following up with the Census Bureau, and my our executive director of the AAPI data, Karthik Ramakrishnan, sits on the National Advisory Committee for the census. And so we've been slowly pushing them to think about implementing this for this. I'll skip over that other example. There was another way that we were looking at the data. Another recommendation was recommendation 3, where we really want to incentivize agencies to go beyond collecting data on the federal minimum standards. But we were taking advantage of the process where I think it was OSTP was asking for use cases to help them determine which data sets should be the focus of federal agencies to improve reporting and data collection. So what we did is we provided guidance to a lot of our partners who use data to submit cases where they use the data for their work and how important that data was for them to accomplish the goals that they were doing. And we coordinated those submissions to the key agencies, and that fed into the whole data equity reporting process that the federal government was undergoing at that time. We wanted to make sure that that our partners knew how to reach out to the different agencies that they interacted with, and what those agencies were looking for in terms of use cases and details, and help them along with that. And then the final campaign is around our recommendation 7, setting up a formal infrastructure for data equity. I will admit that we haven't been able to push as hard on this particular one. We were looking to figure out what's the way to persuade the federal government to create, instead of a working group which can dissolve at any time, create a more permanent infrastructure. And one way that we came up with was to think about a White House initiative, and with that, a Presidential Advisory Commission on Data Equity. We wanted to make sure that because when an initiative gets implemented, there's actually budget commitment to it, there's staffing, and there are people that actually are following every day this particular issue. And so we wanted to, have not been able to push this as hard just due to staffing, but I think that it's another way that we wanted to think about making sure that data equity stays as an important focus, even beyond the current administration. So with that, that's all that I had prepared. Just want to see if I think I lost the chat. Let me see what it is. Okay.
There's
Yeah, so
lots of
actually,
questions.
yeah, there's a lot of questions. So
Yeah.
I'll take a break. I know people have heard me for a while, so I'd love to hear from other people, and then maybe we can go through the chat responses too.
Thank you so much, Howard. This has been extremely useful, and it's particularly useful to both see the recommendations that came out of the thinking and the community consultation you did. And it's also really useful to share with us some examples about how you're going about implementing those recommendations, because that's what a lot of people here are trying to figure out how to do, both how to figure out what steps are feasible and how to get them done. So thank you so much for taking the time to share that. And yeah, as Howard said, before we go through the questions in the chat, is there anybody in the room today that wants to raise their hand and come off mute and ask a question or make a comment? We are happy to make space for you. And I think, wow. Oh, great. Hey, Mish. Go ahead. Hi.
Good morning. You can see me. I do have a question. First of all, I really appreciate what you've shared today. The work that I do, just really quickly, I center on looking at Black women just because they fall low on so many things. And then I look underneath that. And so in 2018, I made recommendations to disaggregate, because I started disaggregating AAPI data. Because in the state of Oregon, I suggested that we might start seeing trends as the population aged, because there is actually a large population of Asian Pacific Islanders in Oregon. And so this brings me to my question: is no one believed me? Because when it's all together, the numbers looked really great. And so I found some data, but I would really love to hear about what happens when you start to look across intersections in communities who are identified as people of color in the United States, and you see commonalities where people are not expecting commonalities, because the way we report out on data, we focus on the race and ethnicity, which has relevance, but we don't necessarily look at commonalities across race and ethnicity, around poverty, around education. So I was looking at your suggestions on the sheet, and I did see that your coalition for communities of color, but I wanted to get kind of some of your ideas that you might have on what those cross community collaborations might look like. Are there people who are trying to start those across the United States, so that maybe there could be power in numbers?
Sure, I'll take a stab at that. So I'll put on my previous role at the Asian American Federation hat, because API data is sort of removed. We're working with data, and a lot of times we're working closely with AA and NHPI community groups to really focus. But our experience my experience at the Asian American Federation is that the Asian community, while growing rapidly, still needs to build those bridges to other communities of color to really accomplish a lot of the things that the mutually common goals. So one example is around language access. For New York State, there's a large community of African immigrants. There are certainly a lot of Latino immigrants, as well as Central American, South American, Indian, who already have limited Spanish capacity. So there's an incredible need for a diverse range of languages to be supported beyond just usually when you have language access, you cover top 5, top 6, top 10. You're still missing like the 10%. And so we had been campaigning with several groups, African communities together, MASA, New York Immigration Coalition, Asian American Federation, to create a solution which was centered around not only workforce development, but also providing people who probably already doing this for their communities, translation services like volunteers, provide them the training certification and make that a career for them and professionalize them. And so there was like a concept of a language bank as well as a worker cooperative. Took many years of working together closely, a lot of trust building. I think that they were finally able to push through in the last budget the seeding for that concept where you have a language bank created as well as worker cooperatives to help train people. So that's one example of how if you look at, you're disaggregating not just Asian data, but also the Black American and African American data, as well as, and then you see the commonalities, you tie that together. My group, because we had the data capacity, ran the numbers for everybody and said, we'll do it for all of the groups because we have the capacity to do it, and it's important that we have the hard data that we need to be able to make that convincing argument. So that's an example of how data disaggregation, looking at language data, really helped pull together a community to address a common issue. I don't know if that answered your question.
It sort of did, but I can always like email you so I can get into
Sure.
the nitty-gritty
Sure.
kind of long game. But that was a great example, and I appreciate that response. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
It's a great question. I love the idea because so much of our sometimes old habits is to kind of slice this data more and more nuanced, which is important, but it also, to both of your points, puts people in smaller and smaller separate groups and hides commonalities. And so
Yeah.
I'm really, really happy to hear that kind of direction, that theme. Hi, Alfonso, go ahead.
Yes, hi, thank you. I'm sorry I'm late. I definitely will watch this recording later on, but related to, maybe have been mentioned before, but related to data disaggregation, you need to have enough numbers of participation and inclusion in those different groups. And one of the things that I particularly witnessed during the pandemic is that sounds like the same group of people were being asked questions all the time within the US, mostly the majority white English-speaking population, because that's the majority of the US population is white English speaker. Asians were invisible. Most of the data collection, at least for the CDC, was in English only, and a few times in Spanish in addition. So I'm kind of envisioning it would be amazing to have, beside all of these same surveys of the same people all the time, sometimes without duplication, if we could all collaborate and push for a truly representative survey of the diverse communities in the US. The multiple Asian groups, the multiple Latino groups, African Americans include people from different countries of Africa too, Pacific Islanders. If we could have one national diversity, survey or data collection, particularly during the pandemic, but also in peacetime, that will provide information for all of those that we usually said we don't have enough data. That would be a dream. And I know that your group AAPI did one recently for including 10 or 15 different Asian subgroups, and it was representative national level, but that was one time, right? If we could do something like that for also the broader diversity, national origins and languages, and a survey that should be done in at least 15 languages, at least. I think that will really progress in terms of not doing this once in a while for some groups, but really having at least one good data source for these populations that are usually not included in our general population data systems.
That would make a huge difference in how we see various countries and communities. And Howard, I want to add a question from the chat onto that question to get your thoughts, because Artrice asked early on something really related to what you're sharing, Alfonso, which is, what do you think about balancing appropriate collection of data from small groups of people, like we're talking about, balancing that with the over collection of data? So, it can become a data collection burden on people who are in important but small populations. Has your group thought about that, Howard?
Yeah, I mean, just to sort of package it as one big, how do we do surveys of small population communities, and I hate to bring this up, but cost and feasibility are key questions that need to be addressed. It's really hard to be able to do using traditional statistics survey methods a representative sample of all of the groups that we hope to be included, right? So we've done some thinking, and we've been talking with other groups about what are the different ways that we could do this. We've tried quick and dirty ways of doing sampling through existing panel surveys, like Momenta. We recently worked with Momenta. The challenge there was English only, and so we were missing the immigrant populations and things like that. But and then we also have to think about if to do it the traditional way, you have the American Community Survey that has a long process, and the data comes out a year later. How helpful is that? But then the other way around is how do we do more rapid surveys? We're also thinking about working with panel survey researchers to create an Asian American and Pacific Islander focus surveys. That doesn't answer the previous. I've already missed the name. Sorry about that. About creating a broad-based one. But we were focusing on how is it feasible to create a Asian American panel survey. So these are individuals. Hopefully, the way you build it is that it's representative, but you're going back to the same people over and over again who are willing to be surveyed to represent their communities. And how do you make sure that that is still remains an accurate picture of the community? And so we are working in partnership with a panel survey research firm to test that and see if it's going to work. So we thought about it. We don't really have any good solutions, to balance the timeliness, accuracy, and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, not a great answer, but it's a difficult question.
It is a really good answer, because the only answer is reality about how we're trying to balance a bunch of competing priorities and the limited resources that we have, and the reality. So the transparent, honest response about what you're thinking about is the perfect answer. It's actually a great answer. Marta, you've been waiting. Thank you so much for your patience. Really appreciate it.
Hey, thank you all so much. I appreciate all of this information. I'm kind of newer to the whole data collection, analysis, and all that. And I just love having these sessions, and especially all the intersectionality and different perspectives. And for me in particular, being here in Asheville, and it's a small district, one of the, practices that I'm very intrigued in is that we have overrepresentation of Black students receiving EC services, right? So, and so in many districts and stuff, we see that same data. And so I am curious about what data are we missing, or what are we, if we continue measuring the same exact things, we're going to continue getting the same exact results, right? So that, AIG is overly represented in white, and AC services is overly represented in Black. And so so I just have a lot of curiosity around them, because both are federally funded, right? And how does one know to track students living in white bodies, and one tracks students living in Black body? And of course, I'm sure that everyone in this call knows the answer. So now I would like to ask, can you disaggregate the data by telling us what the disability is? Because I think that there's a misconception that if a student that lives in a Black body says, don't talk to me like that, you're not my mama, and you're scared and nervous, and then they get sent to the office, and then you get referred to EC services or whatever, is that a disability? Well, the answer is no, right? And how it's being lumped in, and how do you come in? How do you exit? When do you exit? And is that perpetuating the school to prison pipeline? And so again, I'm newer to the data, and if someone could support me, I think I'm very close to something revolutionary here. I'm like, oh, look at these other little measuring things that we've been missing. Let's measure SEL or trauma, and then tie it into whether this is truly a disability or not, I would really, 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 really welcome any support. So there you go. Very long thing. Hard for you to be like, "Ooh, that's a lot of homework, sis."
That's fabulous. These questions are, you have come to the right place. I know for sure several of my friends and colleagues that are on this call specialize in getting equity informed, but equity informed and rigorous answers to those exact questions. And so we would love to do deep dives with you around all of those. Somebody has put their email into the chat.
I'm
Definitely
getting it
connect
right now
with that
Thank you.
person, but you can also make sure, Marta, that you reach out to me. I'll put mine in the chat as well. Because I have a couple of people that we can connect you with that are working on those exact problems. Because absolutely everything you say is, you know, the way we measure it is the reality that we are perpetuating. And then we try and pass that off as objective, value neutral. And then we have the very problem that we are all trying to deal with. And I think that's actually, now that you bring it up, I think that's actually a topic that we should specifically try to do in an upcoming data equity, rather than, you know, we've done a lot of methodological topics, but I think maybe some subject matter topics is a good idea too. So thank you so much for joining us and raising your hand and raising this extremely important point.
Thank you, Heather. And thank you, Howard. That was just very informative. Like, our data person is out sick with his child today. So I'm like, it's being recorded. I'll send it to you.
Yes, it's being recorded.
So thank you all so much.
Sure.
Thanks for coming. Leslie, thank you for waiting. We
Sorry,
can't hear you. There we go. Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. Howard, thank you very much for that presentation. My question is more of an organizational question as opposed to a data question. I noticed that the name of your organization is AAPI Data, but each time you talked about the populations, you talked about Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders. And I was wondering if the organization has had the conversation about changing their name. And one of the reasons I ask about this is because you know, as our language changes, sometimes our organizations are slower to change. And have you had that? Like, how did it come about that as you talk, you include Native Hawaiians, the organizational name is not the same as kind of what I'm hearing from you that you represent?
Sure. I mean, I think I was, so I've only been with the organization for about a year. I think that when it was created, I think the term AAPI was much more common, and Native Hawaiians were part of that Pacific Islander identity. But I think as the community grows and changes, I think there's certainly with the Native Hawaiian community, they're finding, I don't want to speak with them. There might be somebody on the call that can do a better job. We do work with those organizations to help them access and create data, both Pacific Islanders and Native Hawaiians. But there's like a growing sense that there's a Native Hawaiian experience that is tied to like colonialism, the history of how the kingdom was overthrown, and certainly citizenship, being a state and all that kind of stuff carries with it all sorts of different historical and cultural and specificity, right? Compared to sort of the Pacific Islander, and even within the Pacific Islander communities, there's so many different experiences. There's a lot of Pacific Islanders who have, are born citizens. There's some that are national. It's a very complicated relationship, right? So there's a growing sense that there is a really important to be able to distinguish between first it was separating Asian Americans from Pacific Islanders. Now it's sort of, it's not there's a need to acknowledge those stories and the histories and the uniqueness of those populations and what their priorities and needs are, while there's still a sense that there's also there's a balance between also acknowledging that there are some commonalities in terms of the experience where there's a mutual support of each other's experiences and being able to work together in coalition, right? So there's a desire to sort of still have some sort of common coalition building, but also a growing sense that there needs to be, you know, explicitly. So it's a very complicated process. And then the other issue is we've already established ourselves as, you know, AAPI data. There's a brand there. Do we change the brand? How do we work with the Native Hawaiian community? Do they want their, I mean, a lot of them want perhaps want their own organizations. So do we want to be claiming them? You know?
Right.
So there's a lot of things that need to be talked about. And sometimes when you're doing the work, you just focus on doing the work that needs to be done.
Yep.
And sometimes these bigger issues don't necessarily get discussed, right? And so I mean, that's the best explanation that I can have about the thought process that we've had. I know we've talked about it with my executive director, saying, yeah, you know, we're doing a lot of work with the Native Hawaiian communities, but with art, it's not in our name. But you know, we have, you know, do we work on rebranding when we have other, you know, some other stuff? And to be honest, right now we're a staff of 4 individuals, and my colleague and I, when we were hired last year, were the first permanent staff of AAPI data. So we're very much in a startup mode at this point, and we're actually hiring more people as well. So there's a lot of growing pains that are going to happen over the next year or so. So
Yeah,
I appreciate the question, but it's a
I
hard
appreciate the
one
answer
to
too.
answer. Yeah,
It's always a hard one to answer, and I was just curious if you've even, it's good for you for even having the discussion. You know, I deal with, I'm in a very large organization as well, you know, a very large organization that these kinds of questions are raised, but then they kind of get back on the burner. But just to have the dialogue is important, I think. Thank you.
thanks.
Thank you so much. That's a great question and a really thoughtful answer. I really appreciate it. I think we have time for one more topic. And one of the topics that several different people are asking about, Howard, if you would be willing, is there's a request to see the slide about recommendation number 9 again. Recommendation number 9 is lift up community narrative in line with the data narrative and action framework. Would you be willing to show that slide again and maybe tell us a little more about, or I can share it if you want. Tell us a little more about what that means. People are very interested in that idea and would like to know kind of what does that mean? How would that change what we're seeing come out of data if we were successful at this? I think other people are maybe thinking to adopt this idea.
Right. I mean, so you know, sometimes when there's a disconnect between the creation of a data report, right? And we all, I think, have experienced this where something comes out, it gets a lot of exposure, but then it ends up sitting on the shelf, right? So I think our executive director came up with this framework and has been thinking about how do we make sure that the data that we created are tied to the stories of the community, right? So we first have to make sure that the data products or whatever analyses that we're doing are done in collaboration with community groups who are seeking to amplify their stories with data, right? So, you know, when you have a story, you want to be able to put it in context, and so data provides the context in making sure that, you know, it's not just one person that's experiencing this, that there's a whole community, and that there are, and then tying that to specific policies, changes, or programs, or solutions that can help address that particular narrative. And so I don't know if that's I mean, that's the goal that we have in terms of we want to be working with community groups so that when they are doing their advocacy, they have the data that they need to be able to, you know, elevate their stories and be able to drive this, you know, the solutions that they're seeking.
That's really helpful. I really like that framework. We will definitely be digging into that framework because there's a
Sure.
lot of interest in the chat about that.
Sure, and
And
I think I could put you in touch with certainly the social. The center we're part of, the Center for Social Innovation, has done a lot more with community groups around that concept. So I can certainly put you in
okay.
touch with those
Oh,
individuals
yeah.
if there's
Great.
a
Please do.
future talk.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I just made a note. Future
Sure.
talk. That would be great because this is a really popular topic. Last thing, just before we let everyone go, we know, and we've talked about this a couple of times in past Talking Data Equities, that in the United States, there's kind of a public consultation going on right now about stuff that may or may not change in the way that race and ethnicity data is being collected by the federal government. Um, do you have any thoughts about the most important feedback you'd like to see people give in that feedback period? I think it's like 3 more weeks.
Hmm. So again, I don't want to. So I know what's important for
Yeah,
the
I'm asking you
ANHDI
for your
community.
opinion.
Yeah,
I'm not asking you what's important
yeah.
for everyone.
So I don't.
From your
I'm not
opinion,
asking
that's
people
all
to
we're
actually
asking.
go out, and I'm not forcing
Yeah.
people to make the same recommendation.
No,
But I think,
yeah, from your
yeah,
opinion.
yeah. For us, it's definitely to encourage to either increase the minimum standards for data collection, right? So make sure that
Mhm.
you're collecting data for all of the huge variety of experiences and ethnicities that represent the Asian American and Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander communities, and to think about requiring a minimum, some sort of minimum standard for reporting that data, because it doesn't do
Mhm.
any good to collect that data and not have access to it. But recognizing there needs to be a balance, right? So we're thinking in terms of potentially looking at regional groupings or some other way to address the whole. I think somebody else, address the
Mhm.
whole issue of small populations.
Yeah.
Are there categories that we can group together, potential groups that have common interests, and that sort of creating one solution that has been put out is to think about regional groupings. So East Asian, Southeast Asian, South Asian, um, and or other combinations of those. And so I think that's what we are working with the National Council for of Asian Pacific Americans to think about what how we would make a recommendation for that. And so that requires a lot of community feedback and making sure everybody is comfortable with the categorizations that we're going to propose. So I think that
Great.
is the most important.
Really, really useful. Thank you so much. And I think it's really, really helpful to hear from a lot of different perspectives what people would consider to be really valuable feedback to this public consultation. So thank you for being willing to share that. And thank you so much for being willing to, as you say, you're a very small team lifting a huge amount of weight. And so thank you for being willing to take this hour out of your very busy schedule. I really appreciate it. And I know for sure from the feedback in the chat that there's been a lot of appreciation. This has been incredibly helpful. And we will definitely circle back to follow up with some of those resources and do our best to kind of promote and continue to kind of take your advice at figuring out ways to collect data that allow people to feel seen without using data to divide people into such small groups that the power that's in commonalities is hidden. And I really, really appreciate that. Before we let everybody go for the rest of your day, I'll just mention that we are meeting again next Friday, same time, same Zoom link. We have a guest, and it's Dr. Roberta Timothy next week, who is doing amazing work on decolonization of data and methodologies around, especially around people who've experienced trauma and violence. So really looking forward to that. And have Have a great rest of your day. Thank you for spending your valuable time. Everybody who's here with us today. We do not take it for granted that anybody out there cares. We do not take that for granted. So thank you for coming. Thank you for all of your brilliant questions, all the resources and wisdom that you share in the chat and in the discussion. It really means the world to us. So take good care of yourselves and each other. Big thank you to Howard.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for the kind words in the chat, and I certainly appreciate the opportunity. And sorry we couldn't get to every comment.
No worries. We will make time in the future. It's not a one time only. Okay, we're gonna close the Zoom now. Have a great rest of your day, everybody. Take really good care of yourselves and each other. Bye. Bye, everybody.